I'm super excited and so grateful that you're here. I started this podcast so we could have some conversations that would hopefully help turn the messy into healing. If that idea sounds good to you, you must be a pathfinder too. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Talks Too Much with Jill Castle. And this is episode 2 of a 3-part series on education and kind of where we are right now. So we have a wonderful guest. His name's Tiffany. And I'm going to let him do his introductions as I usually do because I don't want to miss anything really good. But Chris, in your introduction, I'm sure you'll talk about PTI so that people end up with that resource by the end of this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Jill. It's a real pleasure to come on your show. And we've known each other for many years, and I'm grateful that you asked. So my name is Christopher Tiffany. I'm the executive director at Encircle Families, and I'm also Jeremy's dad. And Jeremy was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. That has been since diagnosed with intellectual disability, has some pretty significant speech impairment, and he's really what kind of brought me from the classroom to nonprofit work. So I was working as a special education teacher in Central Phoenix when he was diagnosed, and that's kind of what took me on this path to work for Arizona's Parent Training and Information Center, or PTI, which was then named Raising Special Kids, is now named Encircle Families. And really our role and our mission, I guess, is to help parents and family members of children with disabilities understand special education, to be able to work collaboratively with professionals in the field, and to get their needs met through information, education, and training. And so, that's what I've been doing for the last it'll be 15 years, Jill, in about a week. So
that's so crazy because we met because I worked for Raising Special Kids as well. And that's how I got kind of started. And then I moved on from there to the State Department. So that was that long ago.
Yeah, we've known each other for about 15
years. Long time ago. Oh my gosh. And you've just moved up the ranks and are just running a beautiful, beautiful program over there.
Wow.
And for those of you out there, the reason I had to mention PTI is because there is one in every state. So whatever state you're in, if you need special education support, do you guys also still support medical and health
Absolutely.
issues as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're what I like to call a comprehensive parent center. So we are the state's Parent Training and Information Center, or PTI, but we are also the state's Family to Family Health Information Center.
Oh, that's right. Parent to parent.
Yeah, parent to parent as well. We're the Arizona affiliate of Family Voices. So really, if a family is raising a child with a disability, we help them navigate not only school, but also our very complex medical systems that we have in Arizona to support children with disabilities.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so for starters, I'm hoping this podcast will broaden and not just be for parents of kids with disabilities, because I'm finding such commonality with all parents these days, and especially with our school discussion. Yes, we'll be touching on special ed, but, I think unless you have a student that just doesn't struggle academically and is socially comfortable, which to find both of those together is pretty rare these days because so many of our kids have anxiety, even our neurotypical kids, that I hopefully I find this will be helpful for everybody, right?
I think so, Jill, because that was one of the core reasons why we changed our name to Encircle Families was, we know that the largest population of student in special education is specific learning disability, and those students and those families do not necessarily identify as having a special kid
Right.
or having a child with a disability.
Or even ADHD. A lot of people,
Right.
a lot of kids actually have it.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. And
Yeah.
so I think,
I was one of those kids. So have always been big on that platform about, different learners. And I teach it, or I have taught the last 10 years at ASU at the Teachers College and, teaching young teachers about if you make your curriculum and you make your classroom universally designed, it really doesn't matter how many IEPs you have in the classroom because it's accessible by everybody. So I think ultimately that's our goal. I want to do a little precursor here, or disclosure, I should say. Whenever we talk these days about, medical advocacy or educational advocacy, unfortunately, because of the divisive times that we are in, people automatically think we're going to be political. And when you and I were doing the pre-interview for this, you said something that hopefully you don't mind if I steal, because
no.
it really applied to me as well, and it just really hit home. But when I asked you, about how we're going to do this and not sound political, you had a really great comment. Do you remember that?
Oh, I think it probably went something along the lines of, I don't have the luxury of partisanship or being political. And in reality, it's unfortunate that, you know, in today's day and age, there is so much divisiveness when supporting and serving families and children with disabilities. In my opinion, that really shouldn't be a political discussion. It should just be about doing the right thing.
Well, I mean, and brought all kids and all people, and like I'm more interested these days when I meet somebody that I don't really understand their political beliefs. I'm more interested these days. I'm really challenging myself to just ask questions and listen and
Mm,
share, because I've had several talks and I've put out content in the past that really promotes people to see that we have a lot more commonalities than differences. And, you know, it, politics are there to divide us.
mm,
And people don't always realize that it is intentional. I
mm.
think to have that division, it's easier to have that division than it is to have everybody fighting for the same thing, because
Yeah.
that would be way too much power. But I really, really love that you said, I don't have the luxury to be
Mm,
political. I'm going to steal that because I help everybody and I want to help humans and I want to help people. And I need help from lots of different humans. So I really love that you said that. So I'm just going to reiterate one more time that this is not political. We are going to be talking about cuts and things that are happening. I have been told, unfortunately, by people even in my own rare disease community, that when I talk about Medicaid cuts, that I'm not telling the truth, or I'm being dramatic because there aren't going to be any. And the trouble that I have with that is these are people that have trusted me for many, many years to help guide their family. And I say over and over, listen, I'm not getting this from the news. I'm getting this from, I've gone to Washington, D.C. like 4 or 5 times this year, and I'm sitting at the tables, and I'm sitting at the tables with Republicans and Democrats. And so what I want to talk about today is not which way this is going to go, just, our system is is pretty messy. Our educational system's pretty messy anyway, right? And I think that's why people wanted change, because it's not working as effectively as everybody wants, right? And so whether this change that's coming down the pipeline works, or whether it doesn't, or whether it doesn't and then it turns into something great, like none of us know. We do not know what's going to happen. We don't have the looking glass to figure it out, or the crystal ball. So we're just going to have to go on what we have. So most of my audience knows what IDEA is and understands. I've spent a lot of time, especially in the Duchenne community, also other rare diseases, to distinguish between 504s and IEPs, and understanding when you need one and not the other. So for today's purposes, we're going to stick with IDEA, which is the basis of IEPs. If you just have like a quick elevator speech on what IDEA is, just for any listeners that don't know what that is, so we don't get
Sure.
too carried away with acronyms.
Yeah, yeah. So Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was, I believe, passed in 1975, enacted in 1977, and it is what's known as our nation's special education law. And really, the promise of IDEA is to educate students with disabilities to the extent to where they can live independently, be employed, or go on to further education and training. So really what we see is an education law that is really built on the premise of uh, children with disabilities are students first, and we educate them, as we would any other student, and they may need accommodations, may need support, they may need some services, but the end goal is always that employment, independent living, and further education and training, just as any other kid going through school is going to turn 18, is going to graduate high school, is going to go on to have a job and live independently. That was the vision for our special education legislation.
So it was really just supposed to level the playing field.
Yeah.
And I think we can talk about it, but I think it has turned into a lot more than that, and for better or for worse, right? So tell me a little bit about Department of Ed's role in IDEA, what it's been since its
Yeah.
enactment.
Yeah. So I will just put a disclaimer that I am no historian or
Right.
congressional expert, but again, it was a federal law, so that means Congress passed it and gave the authority to the Department of Education to administer, to ensure compliance among the states. And so that's what they currently do in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS. And then the Office of Special Education, they ensure that they manage grants to states and to organizations like ours. We are funded, our organization is partially funded with IDEA funds to implement, to the extent possible, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So that's the U.S. Department of Education's role, is to give out the funding to the states and to monitor compliance of the states. They provide technical assistance to states when states have questions. If a state is not showing adequate progress towards their goals, the U.S. Department of Education will provide improvement plans and monitor those plans for a number of years. So the U.S. Department of Education's role really is to manage how states implement the federal law. If that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Okay, great. That's really helpful to me too, because I know enough to be dangerous, right? But my experience has been on the state level with the state of Arizona Department of Education. So I certainly know how that process works in relation to special education. And I actually worked in dispute resolution, helping parents and school districts sort things out, doing mediation. So, which I loved. And then also going around and doing similar training. Back then, we were before you guys became the state liaison, we also helped educate schools and things like that. And that is part of the national task, is to, because with IDEA, part of IDEA is making sure that everyone at the table understands what's going on and parents are educated,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that they can participate and partner in what's
Yeah.
going on with their kiddo, right?
No, you're exactly right. And that was written into the IDEA from the very beginning, that parents and family members, or whoever was raising that child, had the ability to participate, and they were expected to participate. After that's when the parent centers came in, was at the second authorization, or the first reauthorization of the federal law in the early 80s. What they found in the initial implementation is that families just didn't have any understanding of what their rights were. They were given, a parents' rights packet that was very difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you remember.
I've been forced to read it.
Right, right. Very, very difficult to understand. So IDEA, they enacted grants for family-led and family-run organizations to provide that capacity building for parents and family members to be participating members of those decision-making teams.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I think we talked about this, but one of my, my views have changed over the years. When my son was 6 years old and he had behavior issues and he got actually kicked out of his private school that I was paying a fortune for. And so I had to take him to the nearby public school. And they wanted to just, based on what they were hearing, wanted to just put him in a self-contained behavioral class. And he had Duchenne, he had physical issues, and then he also was on the spectrum. So I understood even back then, that was a very long time ago, that, autism in a lot of the cases, in most of the cases, is a communication issue, not an intelligence issue. So I could tell, I could see signs that he could understand everything. He just couldn't communicate. So I fought to get him in the mainstream classrooms with the one-to-one. And that was my first introduction to advocacy. And I, at that time, looking back, he stayed. They put him in mainstream. I won that argument. I got support and got help, and I believe it was from some of our former colleagues from Raising Special Kids came and helped represent me with the school district. Much to their dismay, he got put in mainstream, and they never had behavior issues
Mm,
because I knew he just wanted to be with everybody else. He was pissed that he was getting all this extra attention and focus in a bad way. And it was what you focus on expands. And so it was making it worse. So in that particular case, I'm not prescribing that for everyone.
mm,
I have to be clear about that because every situation needs something different. That's why it's unique and individualized. However, for us, that worked, and he never had issues the whole time, and he became part of the whole scene. And he still has friends. He's 25, turning 26. He still has friends and teachers from his elementary school that come visit him still to this day. So we won, and that was great. And that was very stressful. I lost sleep, and I wanted to win. Since then, and that's an example of that hardcore advocacy needing to happen, right? Because the school didn't know what was best. I, as the parent, had a belief of what was going to work, and it turned out I did know my son.
mm,
However, since then, I've been a special ed director for a group of 7 charter schools, and I was so excited to finally work my way up to that place. And I was so disappointed because my job was just paperwork. And I sat and I thought I was going to really get to affect change and really help, teachers and students and families all come together. That was my view after doing mediation for so long. I wanted everybody to work together because I still and always believe collaboration is the most important part to make all this work. However, I just sat and did paperwork, and I did paperwork and did goals upon, all of these things that were probably, let's be honest, the teachers didn't have time to look at. They did their best in the classroom. It was like putting their fingers in water in a dike, because it was just chaos at that time, at that particular situation. I'm not saying they all are. I'm just saying where I was. And so it changed how I viewed things. And I started helping families advocate from a different place of wanting to win.
mm.
And a lot of people in our community even are giving bad advice to other parents, like, you've got to fight, fight, fight. And I'm like, you got to collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. You get a good team, no matter what school district in, and you're going to have a good experience, right? So I kind of wanted to hear, I'm sorry I went on, but some people
So,
watching don't have my whole background. So I wanted to explain that, because if Department of Ed were to close, which I think they're just piecing it out right now, I believe. You can update me on that or update us on that. And then also it'll go state by state. And then how do we make sure that we, foster that collaboration? And how do we make sure that when things do go wrong and states, and families disagree, how they're going to have the same rights state to state?
Well, that is a very big that's a very big question with a lot of parts to it. So I will I'll start and then just keep
Yep.
prompting me as we go.
I know I talk
Um,
a lot. That's why it's called
no,
too much.
no, you're good. You're good. No, it's a great question. So my understanding, and again, it's very possible that I don't have all of the most up-to-date information. Things change very quickly, and today is a different day than yesterday. For my understanding, the administration has made no uh,
Secret.
argument secret about wanting to close the Department of Education. Right now, what we've seen is a lot of layoffs from the Department of Education. I don't know that anything has actually been moved. I know that there was talk of um, IDEA and the Office of Special Education Programs moving under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. Again, because IDEA is a federal law that was passed in its own little bucket, it would. My understanding is it would take an act of Congress to repeal that law and then
Yeah.
put something else in place. So um, my understanding is that we haven't seen the structural changes take place. What we have seen is a lot of layoffs, and we've also seen some holding back of some federal dollars for grants, mainly after school grants and summer school grants, those types of things. So I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows exactly how this will play out. Um,
Hmm.
I can theoretically, if the education was block granted and instead of managing education, just sent a whole big pile of money to the Arizona Department of Education, then it would be incumbent upon the Arizona Department of Education to administer special education related services and then all of the IDEA grants in there. That includes early intervention, that includes Part D services, which is where we fall, technical assistance. And there are other technical assistance projects in Arizona, like the Deaf Blind Project, housed at the Arizona
Hmm.
State School for the Deaf and the Blind. So that, I'm not sure how that would all roll out, but my understanding is that it would, the feds would basically be saying, here you go, Arizona Department of Education. Now it's, you need to
Hmm.
manage these grants and these programs and then perhaps report back to us or not report back to us. I'm not, again, nobody really
Nobody knows
knows.
how it's going to go. Yeah, it seemed to be a big priority right in the start. And then they kind of got stuck because they realized that they need Congress to do this. And so I feel like it might have been put kind of on the back burner for a little bit.
That's my perception too, is that,
Yeah.
there was a lot of talk about dismantling the Department of Education, and there was a lot of work to do that as well.
Yeah.
But in my role, I do very occasionally interface with our project director at the Office for Special Education Programs, and they're still there, and they still provide us with assistance, and our project is still going.
Well, good. That's good to hear. And I think some of what we see on social media in general is hysteria. Like we're just seeing extremes, right? We're seeing people that say it's going to be
Yeah,
better, and there's people that say the world's going to fall apart. I'm always a firm believer it's probably somewhere in between. That's usually where it lies. There will be some good stuff that'll happen and some not so good stuff. I guess my goal is to prepare families. And again, I guess I told that whole story before because we need some of those things in place to go up the chain of command if things aren't working with the school district, to be able to do mediation with the state if you have a philosophical difference, or to file a complaint with the state if the school's just outright not following the law. And on the other side, you can do that all day long. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to the collaboration. So that makes the case that if it goes to the states, you still have to do your job as a family and step in there and collaborate. And it's not that advice I'm going to give you whether we have a Department of Ed or not, right?
That's exactly right. Regardless of how this plays out, the responsibility for parents and families to really understand, their child's education and to do the things that you did, be the expert on your child at that meeting and talk about, how, hey, he is having a communication problem. This is a communication issue. This is not a behavior issue. Um, those things are going to be as important as they've always been. And trying to look at it not so much as a win-lose situation, but as a how do we both win? How do we, let's put the child first, and how do you take my expertise as a parent? How do I take your expertise as a teacher? And
Right.
how do we create something unique for my child?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually how I would get in there and work with the teams. I
Yeah.
always would turn down the requests for families that just kind of wanted to fight or sue, which is such a misnomer. You don't sue the school district, you actually just go through the state process, right, of dispute resolution. So tell me a couple things I want to get to, because we could talk forever about the
Right.
philosophy of education, which is probably where the end of this will go, because it really is going to come down to, I remember hearing someone say one time at a conference, special education isn't special. It's just really good teaching. And so again, I'll harp on the universal design and things like that. And I personally, if I got to get in and change the whole system, it would go more in that direction, which we may or may not, the Department of Ed stuff may end up giving us the license to be more creative, and to support schools in doing something different. So that may end up being good. We'll see. I guess we won't know. Tell me a little bit about school vouchers, because that is such a hot topic, right? And people are always kind of debating about school
Oh
choice,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
It's a polarizing issue. It really is, and in a lot of ways, it puts the two parts of our mission as an organization kind of at odds with each other. School vouchers, what we call the empowerment scholarship accounts here in Arizona, um, is very good for some families. It's very good for some families. Some families have been able to access the scholarship and be very involved and active in their child's education, whether it be through a private school tuition or through homeschooling. And also, the way our system is set up is that it relies on, um, you know, the calculation is based on what they would have gotten at their neighborhood school or a charter that they're coming from, and then basically takes that out. And also our system is also doesn't alleviate the public school system of all of their responsibilities either. So, we see the funding piece impacting public education a little bit heavier than I think was probably intended in the beginning when it was rolled out. Um, but two parts of our mission at odds with each other. One, absolutely on the individual level, it can be very good for some families. When we advocate on behalf of systems and for strong education, we see the voucher program as taking a little bit more than I think was originally intended as far as funding is concerned. And we know that public schools have the responsibility to serve all children, regardless. So that's where the kind of the conflict, I think, comes in, and I think why it's a polarizing issue. You know,
Yeah.
our our voucher program started off as a very small population, then it was expanded from families with children with disabilities to then their siblings, and then to failing schools, and then to first responders, active military. And now we have universal expansion, which means that it is available to anyone having that has a child in Arizona. So again, we will hear a lot out of the state legislature about budget overrides and different things like that. Um, Again, it's a very complex issue, and we, as from an organization standpoint, really try to focus in on that individual support that we're giving that family. We always describe, the voucher program for exactly what it is and what it was intended to do,
Hmm.
and if it benefits that family, and that's wonderful. If they're getting what they need through our voucher program, that's great. We're going to help them understand how to do all of the things that they have to do there. Um,
Hmm.
and at the same time, we are going to continue to advocate for a strong public education system that serves all families. So,
Yeah, I always had a really hard time with that. I don't know if you guys see this trend, but with kids that have unique needs, I am constantly working with parents who, well, either think that private school is the answer or they're really, really into charters, And I think a lot of families think that because the numbers are smaller in charters, that it's going to be better. And I always have to kind of educate people on the fact that it could be. There could be some amazing charters out there. I always see both sides of everything. So I'm not saying that there's not some programs that would be amazing, but a lot of them, they receive those federal dollars, so they have to follow IDEA, but they aren't equipped or don't have enough money to, or don't know how to implement that. And then just to be really honest, they also have to pass all those scores. They have to keep the scores up in their school. So a lot of times, am I correct in saying, our kiddos sometimes unfortunately drag the scores down a little bit. And in a public setting, that's much kind of watered down, because of the numbers. Whereas in a smaller situation, that could be a bigger factor. So I have seen a lot of struggles with charters, is because families move their kids to a charter thinking it's going to be magic, and then it kind of goes south, and so they have to keep moving their kid. And yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the grass is always greener, right? Yeah, we too, I would absolutely agree with you. Some charters do a wonderful, amazing job with parents and families, children with disabilities on an individual level. We also do work with a lot of families that have trouble navigating disputes, trying to get what they need in the charter system. I think it could, also have to do with, infrastructure. Whereas a larger district will have a larger infrastructure to be able to hire staff and have instructional assistants for that small population that need it. Whereas a charter that might only be one or two schools might not have that infrastructure to support the child and family. So yeah, I would agree that it definitely is a school option. It's school choice, and when families talk to us about charter schools, we do our very best to help them understand that yes, they accept federal dollars. Yes, they have the responsibility to provide special education and related services. Um, you have every right to enroll your child there. If you have difficulties or challenges navigating uh, getting what you need or getting what you think your child needs for their education, we're here to help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's tricky. I used to train as part of Department of Ed, we would do the special ed training for all the new charters every year.
yeah,
And And then the returning charters would come for their yearly professional development. And unfortunately, I mean, the turnover was crazy. I mean, they were just, I don't know about other states, but in Arizona, they were just going in and out of business. I mean, and it was just constant new charter schools. So my concern with that then ends up being that if we, pull the funds from the public schools, and I'm all about choice, I get that. I mean, I'm all about freedom and creative choices, and our next episode's going to be on creative solutions, and we're going to talk about those things. But I also see when somebody has some challenges, and then they can't, that then they have a really inept school to go back to in their neighborhood that's really understaffed and underfunded. And that it's sort of the chicken and the egg thing too, because we don't want to go back to our school because we don't think it's good, but because none of us are going back to our school, we're not working as a community to make it better.
Yeah.
So it gets pretty tricky now.
Yeah, it certainly can, and I'm glad you brought up the new charter training. We've been doing that for about the past
Oh,
12,
yeah.
12, 13 years, and when we started doing it, there was anywhere from 15 to 25 new charters kind of coming in, but in recent years, especially with this universal expansion of vouchers, um, it's only one or two new charters
Oh,
starting up every year. I think that um, it's probably, if you're going into the business of education in Arizona, it might be easier to go into private school rather than becoming a charter school. So I don't know if there's a direct correlation there or not.
interesting.
I
That's really
just know.
interesting. I mean, I guess the good news of that is that the ones that stick around and make it probably have more experience and probably have more training, and they've worked out some of these issues maybe, but
Or
I
and maybe
guess we'll
they're
see.
yeah, or maybe they've expanded, enough
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
able to have built some infrastructure and programs. Maybe.
And then tell me about the other thing. It's so controversial right now, like the Medicaid cuts. And I don't even want to say it because I get flack all the time, like, but there's not going to be any cuts to our population. Okay, I hope everyone that says that, I hope they're right. I really do. I'm cheering for that to be the case. Everything I've heard up on the Hill in Washington and here on the state level is contrary to that. I am on the Medicaid Advisory Council for the state of Arizona as well. But again, we don't have, we can't see the future, so we don't know. So I'm going to stay optimistic about that. But there are some places that Medicaid funds that people do not understand, right? For a long time they didn't understand our respite care and attending care and those types of services. But what I know a lot of people don't understand is that Medicaid actually funds part of the schools too. So can you
Yeah.
explain that?
Yeah, and again, just disclaimer that I'm not an expert, but I do have a
Well,
lot of
hopefully
experience.
my crowd isn't too vicious.
Yeah. Well, I guess
I'll
I
be
guess what I
fact
mean is
checking.
I guess what I mean is I am not a school finance expert. Let's couch it that way.
Yeah.
Let's couch it that way. But yes, you're absolutely right. Medicaid does fund services that are medically necessary for a student to be able to benefit from their education. So that's going to be things like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy in a lot of cases. It's going to be transportation if it's medically necessary for that child to receive
Oh, that's
specialized
right.
transportation from their home to the school. That is also reimbursable by Medicaid. So, you know, and absolutely like you, Jill, every nonpartisan, independent study that we've seen has us extremely concerned about what is going to happen. And it hasn't happened yet, and we're going to work with whoever we can
For sure.
to minimize impact, whatever the case is. But yeah, that's a real concern for us is that with those future possible Medicaid cuts, we would see that impact on the school level as well.
Yeah, and I think rural's gonna really get hit, the rural's, yeah, and that's not just for, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've seen this and it could have changed. But that isn't just people so my son has Medicaid services, right? Because he has Arizona long-term
Yeah,
disability.
yeah,
But some of our DDD families don't have the Arizona long-term disability part, right? I know
right.
that's a lot of acronyms for people out there, and it does vary from state to state. However, don't it doesn't really matter if the kiddo's on Medicaid, they still are going to receive those services that are going to be paid by Medicaid in that school, correct?
That is my understanding, and I may be mistaken there, but
Yeah.
that is my understanding as well. That you know, if we have a say a child on IEP that it's medically necessary for the school to provide him medication distribution throughout the day. But that child does not meet the institutional level of care that DDD and long-term care has. That in the school setting, you know, a nurse, part of what we pay that nurse is going to be covered by Medicaid.
Okay. That's what I thought. But again, this is not supposed to be the type of podcast where people are freaking out, right? It's about every little detail. I mean,
Right.
you and I are both here, I think, to promote the fact that parents are going to need to be partnering with whatever school or educational avenue that they choose. And I don't know if that's drastically changed overnight with the scene that we've got going on right now, because I think we always did need to do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right?
It's yes, we've always had so we believe and research supports that when parents and teachers and professionals work together, there's just better outcomes for kids. So we believe that, and that's what we've always taught and trained and preached to families. I believe, and I think we both believe or agree that it's going to be even more necessary now with more limited resources that I think we all know are coming.
Well, I'm kind of feeling like this is just my point of view. I am feeling like a lot of the things that are going on are really a call for all of us to get back to community. We're so isolated because of a variety of reasons, and we're getting more and more isolated as time goes on. And I feel like a lot of these solutions are going to be digging into your community and working with your community. Now, there's a fine line with school because I work with parents who I need to educate and help learn how to collaborate and learn how to work with the school and be involved. And then I also work with families that are so stressed and so exhausted. That's just another job and they can't handle it. Maybe it's a single mom, maybe she's got three jobs and she's just got to send her school to get, kid to school and hope they know what they're doing. We've got a lot of those situations. And then we've got the over involved parent too, where their anxiety is driving the whole thing and it feels like it's entirely their job, which isn't fair either. So I'm always assessing the family first and seeing where we're lying on this spectrum and then sort of work with them from there, because the to collaborate does not necessarily mean you have to do the whole thing, right? And it
Yeah.
also doesn't mean you have to spend every waking hour that you don't have, managing your kid at school. I mean, they should be doing their jobs too, right? And not putting it back on the parent, which they do more and more now because they're so understaffed.
Mhm. Yeah, meeting families where they are is extremely important because as you just mentioned, you know, if um, we try to throw the phone book of resources at a family who's over involved, it might be exactly what they need, you know, and they can go and dive in and manage it all and make sure to hold the key teachers accountable. But if we do that same thing for the family that's just trying to put food on their table, that probably won't be successful. So we, certainly take a different approach. But I really like what you said about, you know, presuming that teachers and professionals are going to be effective at their job, and then expecting them to do it. I think that is a critical assumption that we as parents and families, until they prove us wrong, I think, we expect that, okay, my role here is to provide my expertise on my child to this group of professionals that are tasked with educating him. And if I walk into it like that and monitor it, if it turns out to be something else, then I have rights and I have an avenue to explore. But there's no harm in allowing a team to put their plan into action, and monitor it well from the beginning.
Yeah, I sort of always looked at it like if you were a CEO and you were trying to motivate your team of workers and you were delegating,
Yeah,
right? And but you've got to build them up so that they want to do a good job. You've got to make them feel good about the job. If you just beat them down all the time, they're not going to want to work for you, is
yeah,
basically the analogy I would always try to use. Um, and the thing is that, I think as things get more stressed and harder in the school situations that we have right now, expectations too of parents, they have to understand, they how many IEPs does a teacher have now? How many students have IEPs? Some really need them. Some they have, some very involved parents who want to make sure they get their needs met, and that's great. But all of that takes a toll on the staff, right? And they're understaffed, and so it gets really difficult. And even neurotypical kids have not years that they don't have good teachers. Like some years they have great teachers and some years they just kind of don't. And then sometimes they have a bunch of teachers and some are good and some are not. And so I think, keeping in mind that um, to back up and look at the big picture, you've got, 12 years to get it done, right? It doesn't one semester is not going to make or break it,
yeah, yeah.
trying to pace
Well,
themselves.
no, you're right. And we've had a very well documented shortage of teachers and support staff in Arizona for ever since I started working in the field. When I became a special education teacher, I was emergency certified because there was a teacher
Hmm.
shortage, and that was in 2007. So it's teacher shortage and provider shortage is really nothing new for the state. And it's anybody's guess if that will get worse, with kind of everything that's happening at the federal level. I mean, we don't know that for a fact. Um, but you're right. I love the philosophy of not beating people down. I truly believe that people don't go into education to do wrong by kids and families. They come to it from a good place, and if we can start there, I think that's something that we can build on, to create good, positive relationships and plans for kids.
Yeah, I agree. And I try to remind everybody of that too. And there at the same time there are a lot of egos at that table, right?
Yes.
Like that IEP table can often sometimes be just an ego fest. And that's usually when having my behavior background, I go in and go, all right, let's break this down and let's all get out of that because that is not going to help at all, right? Really, that's just fear and insecurity rearing its ugly head because the teachers are insecure. They're afraid of the parents a lot of the times.
A lot of the time.
Administration doesn't want to admit that they're barely hanging on. And the parents scared they're going to be taken advantage of. So it's like you got to break through all of that to have a collaborative meeting. So I usually start with that. Do you have we're coming to close pretty soon. And so I want to hear like So what do parents do? Like, give me your best advice that you're giving your parents, and on a national level too, like, because every state's going to be different, and how how do they navigate these tricky waters right now?
Yeah, well, it is tricky. And so one of the things that we've really tried to be clear about is that this, no changes have happened today. Nothing has happened today. We will see how this plays out over the next couple of years. And we will be at those tables talking about how this might impact families with children with disabilities, so that in my dream is that whatever comes down the pipe, it's not a surprise. We don't have enough information right now to know truly what it's going to look like. We believe that it's bad. It's going to be bad for families, children with disabilities, but how bad, or maybe it's only going to be a little tiny bit bad. Maybe, you know, this happens and we can work with that. Or maybe it's really bad, but you know what? We can work with that too, because we are parents raising kids with disabilities, and we've gone through a lot in our lives, and
No
we're
kidding.
gonna get through this, we're gonna
Yeah, if anyone can handle it, we can. We've got resilience on our side for sure.
get,
Resiliency on our side.
yeah. So that's my message is, we aren't panicking. Yes, we're disappointed. Yes, we're concerned, but we're not panicking. We all made it through a pandemic. We all
I know,
we
right?
we all sat in our houses for a year or 6 months or however long it was. But these things, we're looking at 10-year estimates right now, and anything can happen in 10 years. Anything can
Yeah.
happen in 3 years.
Well, the one thing we can always count on is change, right?
Yes,
We
yes,
know that. And we
yep.
know that things are good and not so good. And then I've got this really attitude. I don't always have it, but I really try to. Is that we just don't know, like that whole Zen master, is this a good thing or is this not a good thing? If everything is crazy and terrible and falls apart, is that bad? I mean, it's going to seem bad. It's going to be really painful for sure for a lot of people. But we won't know until we're years down the road and look back if everything got rebuilt in a better way, which is what, one side of the argument is, there has to be a little collateral damage. I don't know. You're right. I don't know that. I don't know what's going to happen. I know that I will always protect my family. And it doesn't really matter what's happening because we will be okay. And I think a lot of parents, like you said, I love that you said that because I think that is our job. It's to empower everybody that we aren't victims. We're going to take charge of our situations. We're going to figure out creative solutions and we're going to just keep going, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what other choice do we have? What
That's
other
true.
choice do we have? So yeah, that is our philosophy. And the organization has been around for 46 years. And so we've navigated some rough waters. And these are rough waters that we're about ready to go into together. But we'll be here. We'll see what happens, and we'll do our very best
Hmm.
to work with anybody, Jill. Anybody that wants to talk, we will work with them to help them understand what the needs of Arizona families are, so that we can keep trying to support systems improvement and services for people with disabilities.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then the other part of that too is I want to just remind everybody that Chris is just a representation of Arizona for the PTI, but there's PTI centers in all the states. So this is
Yeah.
the kind of support you're going to get if you go to your state PTI, and they should be up on what's happening in the state since it does vary. I mean, it already varies state to state,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it does. Yeah.
yeah, it already varies state to state.
And thank you for plugging the Parent Center Network. There are over 100, well, there's about 60 parent training and information centers, and there's also a host of what we call community parent resource centers, which do the exact same thing. as parent centers, but for special populations. And so if you're listening to this outside of Arizona, go to parentcenterhub.org or Center for Parent Information and Resources. I think it's parentcenterhub.org. And you'll be able to find a map and identify where your parent center or CPRC is.
And we'll put those links in the podcast notes for everybody. So I really appreciate you being here in the beginning. I'm still working out how to do this. I just sort of like jumped in because I had like imposter syndrome and was sitting around forever going, oh, it's got to be right to do it. And I've got to have the right this and the right that. And I just finally gave up and was like, I'm just going to start having conversations and see what happens. So what my idea is that I want listeners, I want to hear how special education's working, if you're using it, even if you have neurotypical kids, what that experience is looking like and how you're getting individualized needs met for them. Because again, special education, I mean, in my perfect world, everybody would be on an IEP, right? That's how it truly should be, because everybody's unique in how they learn. And really, we just want to foster learning, right? And access to opportunities. But what I want to start doing is getting questions. So when you watch this podcast, please put your questions and your comments and put those in the notes or where you comment, because what I really want to do is I'm doing these weekly reels, and really I would rather stop talking and I would rather answer questions. So what I'd like to do is take some of the questions in the podcast and go and do some reels where we answer questions for everybody. I eventually want to have like a call-in kind of thing, because this really is about helping other people, not just, yakking at them, right?
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I've had a wonderful time, Jill. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really great.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful to have you. And thank you again. I appreciate you being here. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for being here with me on Talks Too Much. If today's episode helped you see things a little clearer, or you feel a little less alone, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget, have faith that struggles you're in will soon be your strength. I'll see you next time.